There really is nothing quite like the element of surprise. When the Allied forces appeared over the horizon on the morning of D-Day, it completely caught the Nazis off guard. They weren't ready for such an enormous attack, at least not here. According to German intelligence, an attack was expected to take place 150 miles away in Calais, and so most of their troops had been moved to defend that location. While the Nazis were defending an empty beach, the Allies stormed their way into Normandy and ultimately went on to win the war. The Nazis had been tricked, and it was largely thanks to one man who had spent years trolling them from his own home. By feeding them correct but useless information, he led them down rabbit holes, slowed them down, and ultimately tricked them into losing the war. This man had no spying experience, and yet with sheer charisma and imagination, he managed to win the trust of Hitler while simultaneously becoming Britain's best spy. Before the outbreak of World War II, Spain was having its own civil war between the Republicans and the Nationalists. No one despised that war more than Juan Pujol Garcia, a chicken farmer from Barcelona. His farm was taken by the government, his mother and sister were kidnapped, and he himself was forced to fight. He hated the extremism of both sides. So when World War II came along, he was determined to do something to stop the Nazis. He went to the British embassy in Madrid and offered to start spying on the Germans. But the Brits were suspicious and turned him down. So Pujol came up with a different plan. This time he went to the German embassy, pretending to be a passionate Nazi supporter who worked for the Spanish government. At the time, the Germans didn't have a reliable spy network in Britain, and they desperately needed help. So they hired him. They gave him a code book, a bottle of invisible ink, $3,000 in cash, and told him to move to London and start spying on the British. Instead, he moved to Portugal and simply pretended to be reporting from London. Using nothing but a map of Britain and a tourist guide from his local library, he began sending reports describing the places he was visiting and the things he was seeing. Military training exercises on Lake Windermere, warships leaving the southwest coast, and so on. In between his military reports, he filled his letters with small personal details, going for walks, visiting cafes, mentioning when he felt unwell. These touches made him seem real. Then he took things further. Pujol started creating a network of sub-agents who were supposedly feeding him information from all over the country. There was a Swiss-German businessman stationed in Liverpool, a Venezuelan student in Glasgow, a Portuguese man in Wales, and a pilot who carried letters from London. Each of these agents had detailed backstories and families that Pujol described at length. Of course, none of these people actually existed, but if the Germans ever questioned him, his agents could take the blame since they were the ones reporting the information. Each letter was long, detailed and believable, so convincing that the Germans started to trust him completely. They even began sending him $500 a month to fund his fake spy network, the equivalent of about $11,000 today, and this was only the beginning. So far, the Germans were impressed with Pujol's work and began asking him for more specific information. That's when things took an interesting turn. In his third letter, Pujol reported that a convoy of 18 ships had left the port of Liverpool on the 28th of March, headed for the island of Malta. He had made it up completely. But by coincidence, a fleet of warships actually had left Liverpool around that same time. Before his letter reached the Germans, it was intercepted by Britain's intelligence agency, MI5, sending them into panic mode. A full-scale manhunt was launched to find this mysterious network of spies, but of course they found nothing. When MI5 began reading through Pujol's letters, they noticed something odd. In one report, an agent had written that people in Glasgow would do anything for a litre of wine. That small detail gave him away. Britain didn't use the metric system, and it didn't fit Scottish habits. The British soon realized that the Germans were wasting time and resources chasing false leads, fake convoys, fake locations, all thanks to whoever was behind these letters. And it was working. MI5 was so impressed that they tracked Pujol down and decided to turn him into a real British spy. In April 1942, Pujol moved to London for real and was given the code name Garbo, after the actress Greta Garbo, the master of deception. Now, with access to genuine intelligence, Garbo's double life truly began. The Allies were planning a surprise invasion on the north coast of Africa, where Nazi forces were gaining power. Over the next few months, Garbo began planting subtle hints to make the Germans believe the attack would happen somewhere else. Norway, one of his agents, saw military mountaineering drills taking place and Canadian troops gathering in Scotland. Another heard rumors about Russian troops advancing westward. Without ever mentioning Norway by name, Garbo painted a believable picture that it was the likely target. Hitler himself took the bait. Terrified of a northern invasion, he moved hundreds of thousands of troops to defend Norway. Garbo's next move was brilliant. The real African invasion was set for November 8, 1942. Garbo wrote a report describing the attack, planned in exact detail and dated it a week early, but he held onto it intentionally so it would arrive after the invasion. The letter reached the Germans the day after the attack, too late to help them. Yet instead of suspecting deception, they praised him. "We are sorry it arrived too late," they wrote, "but your last report was magnificent." By the end of 1943, Garbo had expanded his imaginary spy network to 27 agents. The Germans were now sending him over $100,000 a month to fund it, and they trusted him completely. They were so confident in his reports that they stopped hiring new spies in Britain altogether. And now, Garbo was ready for his masterpiece, D-Day. The D-Day landings in Normandy were set to be the largest seaborne invasion in history. More than 2 million soldiers from 12 nations, arriving in over 100,000 vehicles. Pulling it off without the Germans realizing was an impossible challenge. But Britain had the best man for the job. To avoid delays like last time, Garbo switched from letters to encrypted Morse code. He'd write his reports in Spanish, break the words into clusters, encrypt them with a code book, and have an operator send them directly to Germany. Now able to send more information, Garbo began weaving the biggest deception in modern warfare. One of his agents reported that London underground tunnels were being extended toward the southeast to move ammunition. Another claimed to see assault barges gathering at Dover. Garbo himself invented an entire U.S. Army, supposedly preparing in southern England. Every message pointed to one conclusion, that the Allies would attack Calais, not Normandy. To make his lies convincing, the British created fake evidence. Wooden airplanes sat on fake airfields, inflatable tanks filled open fields. An entire army of illusions, ships, fuel tanks, supply depots, all designed to fool German reconnaissance planes. They even ran newspaper stories showing King George inspecting troops in Dover. The plan worked perfectly, intercepted. Communications revealed that Hitler personally believed the Normandy landings were just a diversion, and that the real invasion was still coming at Calais. Whenever Garbo sent an update, the Germans moved their pins on the map to match his words. Hitler ordered hundreds of thousands of troops to hold Calais, men who would never reach Normandy in time. On June 5th, the night before D-Day, Garbo insisted that German operators stay awake for a message at 3 a.m. Big news was coming. At that hour, he reported that soldiers were being given vomit bags and rations, a sure sign of imminent invasion. But the German operators had gone to bed. When the Allies landed at Normandy at 6:30 a.m., they did so completely undetected, outnumbering the German defenders 3-1. The battle was brutal, but the Allies broke through, secured the beaches, and began their march across France. Even after days of fighting, Hitler refused to move troops from Calais. He still believed Garbo. The second invasion he expected never came. Garbo's lies had saved thousands of Allied lives and ensured victory in Europe. Despite their defeat, the Germans remained so impressed with Garbo that Hitler awarded him the Iron Cross, the highest German military honor. At the same time, Britain awarded him the Order of the British Empire, OBE. He became the only person in history to receive medals from both sides of the same war. After the war, fearing Nazi retaliation, Garbo faked his own death and fled to Venezuela. For decades, the world believed he was gone. That is, until 40 years later, when a British writer named Nigel West tracked him down. After calling nearly every Juan Garcia in Barcelona, he finally found him. Garbo agreed to return to Europe. where he visited Normandy, the beach that his lies had saved, and finally understood the scale of what he had accomplished.